Princess Dracula, Special Online Version, Book 1, Part 1, Author John Patrick Kennedy.
January 1476, Our Lady of the Mountains Convent near Bucharest. Tomorrow, I will be 18 years old. Princess Ruxandra Dracula knelt in front of the cross in her initiate's cell. This was the last night she would spend in the small, plain, whitewashed room. The cold of the stones bit at her knees through her thick woolen skirt and cloak. Winter had enveloped the convent, and the cold had wrapped itself around all the buildings, leaving the nuns and initiates huddling together for warmth. With the window and shutters closed tight and the candle lit, the freezing air from outside still crept in, turning Ruxandra's breath into fog as she tried to call her mind to order. She wanted nothing more than to be in her bed. Her bed warmer, a heated towel-wrapped brick, was already spreading its warmth beneath the thick woolen blankets. She shivered, then shook her head and closed her eyes. She had to pray before bed. It was her duty to pray. Only after tomorrow, it wouldn't be her duty anymore. Her father, Lord Vlad Dracula, the prince or voivode of Wallachia, was coming for her on her 18th birthday. He had sent word 2 months before. Assuming he is still alive, he had been at war most of her life. Stories of victories and losses, of barbaric cruelty enacted on both sides, reached the convent on the mouths of merchants and townspeople. Most often, she heard of how nobly her father fought the war. But other times, less savoury stories came. One which told of an entire town of men, women and children impaled by her father to stop the Turks' advance gave her nightmares for weeks. But according to the Mother Superior, he was coming tomorrow and would take Ruxandra away to assume her rightful place at court. Perhaps she would be married to someone not too much older, someone handsome and kind. Was there anyone like that among the aristocrats her father would choose from? And perhaps her husband would allow her some freedom. She wouldn't be completely free, of course. That was impossible. But she had grown tired of the convent's rules. They made her wear a wimple to cover her long red hair, tied down so no one would see her breasts, and covered her head to foot. It was uncomfortable, and Ruxandra would be glad to be done with it. She was almost asleep when her door clicked open and 2 giggling, whispering shadows stepped in. "Quick, get inside," one girl hissed. "I am," the other whispered. Ruxandra pulled the blanket down just far enough to see the 2 girls shut the door behind them, stuff something under it to block any light, and throw a blanket over the shutters. A flint sparked once, twice, and a taper flared to life, lighting the faces of her friends. Tony was a short blonde whose breasts pushed against her nightdress and were the despair of the nuns' attempts to instill modesty. Her parents had sent her to the convent in desperate hopes to keep her from scandal. And between her sweet round face and her ability to lie shamelessly, she almost managed to make the nuns believe they were being successful. Madison was slim, dark and gorgeous, a mischief maker whose pranks had gotten her in trouble more than once. They were her best friends, but they were also more than just friends. Tony called it practice for when they had husbands. Madison called it wonderful. They never shared more than a kiss, but still the nuns declared it a sin in no uncertain terms. And while Ruxandra did her best to obey the nuns in most matters and to turn her thoughts to God and do his good work, she could not stop loving their friendship. From the moment she'd first held Tony's hand, she'd known that, whatever else their feelings were for each other, they were too sweet to be sinful. "What are you doing here?" Ruxandra whispered. "You'll get caught." "We brought treats." Madison held up a small sack. "Raisin buns from the kitchen. And we brought extra blankets." Tony threw them at Ruxandra. "So make room." The 2 girls piled onto the bed, almost crushing Ruxandra. They squeezed together, sitting side by side with their backs to the wall. Tony wrapped the extra blankets around their shoulders to ward off the cold of the stone behind them. Madison rearranged Ruxandra's blankets and the 3 let their legs tangle tight together. Madison handed Ruxandra a small raisin bun. Ruxandra bit into it, savouring the sweet, rich taste of butter and herbs and juicy raisins. It was divine. "I am so glad you're here," Ruxandra said around her bite of bun. "I was worried I wouldn't see you before I left." "We would never allow that to happen." Tony kissed Ruxandra's cheek, letting her lips linger. "We're going to miss you, you know." "Very much," said Madison, putting her hand on Ruxandra's leg. A thrill ran up and down Ruxandra's spine. Plus, we didn't want to neglect your education. Tony pulled out a small book with a plain, unmarked cover. So we brought this. Ruxandra peered at it. What is it? A gift from my fiancé. Tony grinned and opened the book. Ruxandra's eyes went wide and her cheeks flushed bright red. She clapped her hands over her mouth to stifle her laughter. Oh my! Oh my God! The page showed a woman on her hands and knees, gazing over her shoulder at the man behind her. They were engaged in very sinful things that Ruxandra had never seen before. Tony's eyes twinkled mischievously. It's an educational guide, she whispered, for adults. Ruxandra's curiosity piqued, and she couldn't resist flipping through the provocative pages. Ruxandra's heart raced as she devoured the scandalous illustrations, her mind swirling with forbidden fantasies she had never dared to imagine before. At least you know you won't get pregnant in that picture. Madison poked Ruxandra's arm. You should have done it with a man before you left, you know. I'm a princess. I must keep my virginity for my husband, unlike you little merchant girls. She wrapped her arms around both and squeezed them tight. Besides, I like what we do together. So do I, but a girl needs variety. Tony turned the pages again. She landed on a picture of 3 women. Tony's fingers traced the image, her voice barely a whisper. Imagine the possibilities, she said, her eyes meeting Ruxandra's with a daring glint. The door slammed open. Filth! Disgusting filth! Sister Sophia, a candle in her hand and her eyes wide and blazing, glared at the 3 girls. You dare profane the Lord's house with this obscenity! Shame! Shame on all 3 of you! Please, sister! Ruxandra sat up. She was the one leaving tomorrow. If she could take the blame. It was my fault. I seduced them. They were coming in to celebrate my birthday and I... Do you think me stupid? Sister Sophia's harsh voice cracked like a whip. I have seen the way you 3 look at one another, have watched you steal away from your chores to engage in your carnal pleasures. And you never joined us? Tony rose, her large breasts jutting out toward the nun like a dare. You should have. Sister Sophia's slap cracked against Tony's face, knocking her over. The nun strode forward and grabbed the girl's hair, pulling her off the bed. Silence, you whore! Ruxandra's final night at the convent should be a time of reflection and prayer, and by God, I will see that it is. Tony winced but held her ground, defiant. Ruxandra's eyes filled with tears, knowing their friendship had been exposed in the most brutal way. You will all come with me now. And since you chose to be harlots, you can leave your clothing behind and show everyone your shame. She forced Tony down into a half-pool and dragged her from the room. Ruxandra and Madison, naked and shivering, followed them down the hallway of the novices' building. 2 other nuns stood by the outside door, disapproval clear on their faces. Sister Sophia pointed at Madison. Open it now. Madison swallowed hard but did as she was told. A blast of wind blew snow into the building, driving pins of cold into their skin. Sister Sophia dragged Tony into the freezing night. Follow, now!